Here is located at the westernmost end of the hurricane corridor in the Caribbean region. It can be said to be the most inhospitable area on Earth. Aggressive animals such as jaguars roam here. There are venomous jungles, ubiquitous terrifying swamps, and all kinds of deadly mosquitoes and insects. All these have turned this place into a veritable human exclusion zone, and just 5 days ago, a sudden heavy rainstorm triggered flash floods, turning some low-lying jungles into swamps, making this map even more challenging. Today, 2 survival experts are going to challenge this nightmare-like Belize. The man is named Cass, a retired soldier. He has a resilient spirit and rich survival experience, with an overall score of 7.2. The other female challenger is named Shannon. She is a survival instructor. Her professional and superb survival skills and rich knowledge of plants have enabled her to conquer countless dangerous places, with an overall score of 6.9 as well. This is still a well-matched team. Amidst the roar of the engine, the 2 arrived at the edge of the Belize jungle. After undressing crisply, the 2 challengers took big strides and walked towards the gathering point. In the vast jungle, 2 naked strangers, a thrilling survival journey is about to begin. After introducing themselves to each other, the 2 confirmed their initial items. Shannon brought a knife, while Cass brought a fire starter. This is still the golden combination for wilderness survival. According to the map, their current gathering point is in the southeast of the jungle. By walking north for about 8 or 9 kilometers, they can pass through the flooded jungle and reach a dry highland. Here, they need to find a way to survive for 21 days and then pass through a dark cave to reach the open space outside and wait for helicopter rescue. The challenge is very difficult, but neither Cass nor Shannon backed down. After confirming the direction, the 2 set off. It was still easy to move around the outskirts of the jungle. The 2 walked while getting to know each other. After all, they would need to rely on each other to survive for the next 3 weeks. Fortunately, both of them are friendly players with a strong team spirit. The atmosphere was harmonious along the way. Both Cass and Shannon had learned a lot about their teammate, but as they delved deeper into the journey, they gradually felt the ferocity of the jungle. The ground underfoot was now difficult to walk on. Not only were there various sharp plants, but also many snakes and insects hiding under the dead leaves, forcing them to slow down and proceed carefully. After spending some time, the 2 passed through the outskirts of the jungle and arrived at the depths of the jungle, which had become a swamp. Due to the heavy rain, countless snakes, insects, and predators had been forced to higher ground, and Cass and Shannon's destination was also one of the few highlands in this area. So there, they were likely to be neighbors with some terrifying animals. Moreover, the flooded jungle was even more difficult to walk through, because the pile of dead leaves itself required caution, let alone in this combination of deep water and dead leaves. One couldn't tell what would be stepped on with one foot. Halfway through, Shannon began to show her expertise as a plant master. When passing by an agave plant, Shannon wanted to get some leaves, because they might be useful to them. However, Cass, who was watching her work beside her, didn't think much of it, because in this kind of wilderness survival, one needed to weigh the pros and cons. Wasting a lot of energy for some agave leaves was quite unwise in his opinion. Besides, it was getting late. So after tearing off a few pieces, Shannon left under Cass's persuasion. But this also made Cass a bit worried, because in a 21-day survival challenge, if the 2 had different survival concepts, it would greatly increase the difficulty. But it was still too early to draw such a conclusion now. Cass still dutifully carried the things Shannon had gathered and continued walking. Soon, the terrain began to rise gradually. They had walked out of the swamp area, and as soon as they went up this small slope, the 2 were pleasantly surprised to find that there was a cave ahead. When encountering a cave during wilderness survival, it was truly a pleasant surprise. As long as it was confirmed that it was not the nest of some top predator, it would be the best shelter for survivors. It could shield them from the wind and rain, and save them the effort of building a shelter. Cass and Shannon explored inside it. Indeed, animals lived here. However, this cave was made of prehistoric limestone. In one corner of the cave, it was quite complex and deep. A long time ago, the ancient Mayans had explored this labyrinthine underground world, but many people who entered it never came out again. Cass and Shannon had no such conditions, not even any means of illumination. They were quite self-aware, and just walked around the vicinity a couple of times. Then they found a place to set up camp, at a flat and open spot near the cave entrance. As for survival, the top priority on the first day was to make a fire. Although they had a fire starter, due to the heavy rain scouring in the previous period, Cass still went through great pains before finally lighting a fire. Although he ended up looking rather disheveled, it greatly invigorated him. With the fire, not only could they drive away wild beasts at night, but they could also keep warm. As the sky gradually darkened, the 2 prepared to rest around the fire and experience their first night in the perilous jungle. When darkness descended upon this land, the creatures hidden in the dark became active. In the middle of the night, they began to be awakened by a noise. By the faint light of the fire, he only saw a pair of eyes shining with a dim light in the darkness. This scared him out of his wits. It wasn't until the next day when the sun rose that the two managed to get through that painful night. Cass had hardly slept at all, because not only was there the incident at that time, but also the mosquito and insect bites that he couldn't stand. Even now, there were still small ticks in his eyes, but that wasn't the worst part. Cass's most vulnerable male features had been attacked, which made him extremely angry, but there was nothing he could do about it. At noon, it had been more than 24 hours since Cass and Shannon started the challenge without any water intake. The human body will collapse after 3 days without water, but not everyone can hold on for 3 days. Not having water for 1 day can already cause physical discomfort, so their main task now was to find drinkable water sources. They hadn't considered the water in the forest swamps. That stuff pretty much contained the entire periodic table of elements. It was still dangerous even after boiling, so at Shannon's suggestion, they turned their attention to some plants. This plant master could identify plants that contained moisture, but even so, the few drops of liquid contained in those plants were just a drop in the bucket, completely unable to replenish enough water for them. It even consumed more of their physical energy, so the two returned to the campsite dejectedly. Since getting water from plants wasn't feasible, Shannon began to consider the accumulated water in the cave, because the water flowing down from the mountaintop was likely to pass through the cave, and after being washed against the rock walls, this water might be quite clean, but it also carried a large amount of calcium, which might cause kidney stones, and was somewhat risky to drink, but this was, after all, the only way. So after searching for water sources all day without success, the two started drinking this water dripping down from the stone walls. But compared to the danger of becoming dehydrated and getting into a critical situation, this risky behavior was worth a try. Time came to the 5th day. The two who had risked drinking the stone wall water didn't show any problems, which made them feel a bit relieved. But then came a new dilemma. They had hardly eaten anything these days. Now that the water source problem was solved, what they needed was food. This jungle was home to a wide variety of species, but for two human beings with bare hands, relying only on a knife and some spears made from sticks to catch prey was extremely difficult. Cass and Shannon had been hunting for several days, but had no shohua here at all. Even Cass had started to have ideas about howler monkeys, but that was really unnecessary. Monkeys, as social animals, could easily attract a whole group, not to mention the highly aggressive howler monkeys. A defenseless, naked human being, surrounded by monkeys in the wild, would only end up dead. So Shannon began to think of other ways, such as setting traps in the cave, in the hope of catching those cave creatures that they couldn't even see a trace of. But by the 6th day, the traps were still intact, but the bait was gone. The success rate of such primitive traps was extremely low. As for Cass, he was out chasing after the tracks of prey every day, but it wasn't easy. After several days, there was no progress at all, and in this kind of jungle, even if Cass saw a snake, it would be very difficult to catch it, because it could just twist its body and burrow into countless dead wood and fallen leaves, making it impossible to find again. Without replenishing energy for a long time, he was now almost unable to move. The accumulated fatigue and hunger caused a strong reaction in his body, and what's more troublesome is that it started raining again at this point. You should know, the rain in the rainforest doesn't stop in just a day or half a day. This sudden downpour signified that, in the coming days, not only would they be unable to go out hunting, but they also had to pay attention to keeping the firewood dry. For them, at this stage, this was making a bad situation worse. But even around the fire, their body temperatures were continuously dropping. In the wild, if the body temperature becomes too low, it basically means life-threatening danger. So all they could do now was conserve their physical energy as much as possible, maintain their temperature, and pray for the rain to stop. Beyond that, they had no other options. By day 10, the rain finally stopped. Over the past few days, not only had their condition worsened further, but their original stock of firewood was almost exhausted. And now, having just experienced a heavy rainstorm, finding dry firewood was even harder than finding food. This made Cass quite frustrated. However, seeing his teammate Shannon's condition, he felt it was all worth it, because compared to himself, he was more worried about the safety of this female teammate. If they couldn't find food soon, not only would he himself be in danger, but Shannon would definitely be unable to continue. Surviving alone in this kind of jungle is simply as difficult as climbing to the sky. So, in Cass's mind, teammate Shannon's safety was the top priority, but the situation was still not optimistic. After just one clear day, by day 11, it started raining again. This made both of them feel despair. So, as a last resort, they decided to explore the depths of the cave. But the pitch-black cave was already full of unknowns, and on top of that, they had almost no means of illumination. So this exploration yielded almost nothing. They only witnessed the eerie and terrifying aspects of the cave, as well as countless vicious bats. With no other choice, the two could only retreat. By day 14, they had both reached the point of being completely exhausted, their resources depleted. Cass still carried on as usual, searching for food and gathering firewood, but after 2 full weeks of fatigue and hunger, he was also about to reach his limit. This state of being physically drained can make a person become irritable, but Cass didn't get angry at Shannon, who had been out of sorts. Instead, he lay down somewhat resignedly. This also made Shannon worried, because since the challenge began, Cass had always been helping her. During the days when Shannon's physical strength was exhausted, he almost single-handedly took care of all the work. Now that Cass was drained, it was her turn to step up. The atmosphere in this team was really as good as it could possibly be. From the start of the challenge until now, the two had no disagreements or conflicts. They both cared deeply about their companion, were willing to devote themselves, were willing to give, were willing to care for each other. This kind of spirit, in a 2-person wilderness survival challenge, is extremely precious. But Cass had a minor flaw, because when Shannon managed to find a few snails, he thought it was a bit too little, and was unwilling to eat them. This wasn't him throwing a tantrum, because in Cass's view, these few snails were of no help to him, and he felt that Shannon might need these snails more. Time came to day 17. Shannon, already so thin she was just skin and bones, was still forcing herself to work. She was extremely weak. But for her own sake, and for her teammates' sake, she couldn't give up. However, she really was about to reach her breaking point. Seeing her suffering teammate, Cass stood up once again. Although he was also nearing complete exhaustion, his concern for his companion made him step forward. He used all his remaining physical strength for this final hunting attempt. This time, Cass encountered a giant python in an open area. This was the final hope, and as expected, this robust giant python became the first and only meat meal for Cass and Shannon in their 17 days of survival. Not only did it allow them to replenish necessary energy, but it also greatly boosted the morale of both. This pair of harmonious, mutually supportive challengers had seized hope. With this one full meal, the two easily managed to hold on until day 21. Next, they had to face the final perilous task, to traverse this deep, dark cave and reach the open ground on the other side. For them, who had struggled to survive for 21 days, this was clearly an immensely arduous task. The cave was pitch dark. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. There were all kinds of poisonous insects and countless bats. Relying only on the weak light from their handheld cameras, the two felt their way through the cave, stumbling along uncertainly. At one point, Shannon's handheld camera even accidentally broke. But with the close, seamless mutual assistance between the two, they still successfully made it out of this hair-raising dark space. They successfully reached the wilderness open space on the other side of the cave. Shortly after, accompanied by the roar of the helicopter had arrived above their heads. This also signified that the challenge was over. Through their own efforts and mutual help, they successfully endured the nightmarish 21 days. However, ultimately, the two had stubbornly endured by simply holding out against hunger. Therefore, Cass's overall score only rose to 7.4, Shannon's was only 7.1. But their attitude of mutual assistance and caring for their companion was the most precious thing. In this challenge, in the mountainous jungles of Nicaragua, two challengers are about to embark on a crazy survival journey. In this wild jungle, venomous fer-de-lance snakes and toxic wolf spiders lurk in the shadows, while fierce and ruthless cougars stroll through the jungle unabashedly. This is truly a perilous place. Hunger and ubiquitous dangers can drive a person insane. Can this unfamiliar man and woman successfully survive here for 21 days and successfully complete the ultimate task to reach the exit? This female challenger is named Jacqueline. She is a professional wilderness survival instructor and a vegetarian. Her hobbies are closely related to her work, so Jacqueline is very much looking forward to this challenge. And in simulation training, she received an overall score of 7.1. Her male teammate is named Adam, an experienced hunter. This man has a huge passion for the jungle and hunting, and is even proficient in the language of crocodiles. His overall score reached 7.3. Escorted by an off-road vehicle, the two arrived at the edge of the jungle. After stripping completely naked, the two plunged into the jungle. Soon, Jacqueline and Adam met at the gathering point. Both of them had lively and outgoing personalities, and quickly became familiar with each other through conversation. They confirmed their initial items. Jacqueline brought a fire starter, while Adam brought a knife. Then the two took out a map, and began to confirm their task. According to the map, they needed to find a suitable tributary, under the prominent waterfall, to set up camp, and then follow the terrain downhill, to reach the exit on the mountain trail built by the local dragons. The two estimated the time based on the map, and set off without delay. After all, sunset wasn't far away, and they needed to hurry up and find a campsite to build a shelter. Along the way, the two chatted as they walked, getting to know their survival partner, but to be honest, the two seemed to have labels that didn't quite fit together, because Adam came from a family of hunters, and hunting was his greatest interest. As for Jacqueline, she was a vegetarian who deeply respected nature. It has to be said that a vegetarian participating in a survival challenge is highly controversial. For now, the two were getting along not badly. Moreover, after Adam heard that his companion was a vegetarian, he started to have a mischievous plan to make her eat meat during this challenge. The innocent Jacqueline had no idea that her teammate had already started hatching bad ideas and was solemnly vowing that she wouldn't eat meat. As they talked and walked, the two were moving at a decent pace and soon reached the depths of the jungle. As they walked, they observed their surroundings, and Adam quickly identified a spot to set up camp, so they got busy. But before that, Jacqueline first made herself some clothes to cover her private parts. This harmonious way of getting along made both of them feel very comfortable. With their full concentration, when the sun began to set in the west, their shelter was roughly completed. But as the sky darkened, a storm began to brew, and because they had been busy building the shelter, they had no time at all to start a fire. When night fell, the heavy rain arrived as expected. Without a fire, and with a shelter that wasn't waterproof, Adam and Jacqueline spent their first night of this survival challenge, shivering and huddled together in the cold. Moreover, with this rain, they probably wouldn't be able to find many dry pieces of firewood. Given this situation, even if it didn't rain tomorrow, starting a fire would still be a problem. This initial setback left both of them quite dejected. On the second day, although the rain had stopped, the situation was still not optimistic. Because they had been soaked by the rain all night, they urgently needed to keep warm now. But after a recent rain, it was quite difficult to find dry firewood in the damp jungle. And not only was the cold a problem, without a fire, they also couldn't boil and disinfect river water. Drinking raw water in the wild was tantamount to gambling with one's life. But fortunately, Jacqueline quickly lit a fire using a bird's nest and some tinder. Adam quickly found bamboo tubes to fetch water. But then another accident happened. Because the firewood wasn't dry, they could only use some tinder and small pieces of wood to maintain the campfire. Although this wouldn't cause the fire to go out, it also couldn't make the campfire burn more vigorously. Of course, this meant they couldn't boil the water. Their enthusiasm was dampened again. But at this moment, Adam turned his gaze toward the nearby waterfall. Generally, water that flows so fast and washes over rocks is relatively clean, but Jacqueline was a bit worried, because although the waterfall didn't seem far away, it should actually be about 3 kilometers away in reality. However, Adam was very determined. They had no way to boil water to drink on their own at the moment, so they decided to rest for a day and head straight to the waterfall with full energy the next day. On day 3, the two got up quickly. They needed to go to the waterfall today to replenish their body's water. The human body would collapse after 3 days without water, and organs would gradually stop working after 2 days without water. Jacqueline was already showing mild symptoms of dehydration at this point, but with her tenacious spirit, she kept following behind Adam. Adam, who was clearing the way ahead, was actually very worried about his teammate's condition, because she looked extremely weak. But once they reached the waterfall, their dilemma would be solved. So Adam cleared the way, while constantly encouraging Jacqueline. Although they stumbled along the way, Jacqueline, with Adam's encouragement, successfully arrived at the foot of the waterfall. The water here, having been washed by limestone, was basically drinkable directly. The two parched bodies were relieved. Then, time came to day 4. After getting through the water crisis, they now needed to consider food. Of course, Jacqueline was a vegetarian, so she didn't plan to eat any meat. Although her body was also craving protein, Jacqueline didn't want to break her rule. When Adam caught some small snacks, like crabs, earthworms, and snails, she just watched without eating herself, but didn't ask Adam not to eat them either. That was what a true vegetarian was like. Adam tempted her several times beside her, but Jacqueline remained firm in her original intention and didn't waver. Adam didn't force her either, because he knew there was still a long time ahead. On the night of day 8, when the two were huddled together for warmth in the cold, they were suddenly awakened by a strange noise. Although they knew there was something near their campsite, with only the faint light from the handheld camera, they couldn't see anything clearly at all, so they could only stay on guard, and remained sleepless all night. On day 9, the two, still shaken, began to consider safety issues. Adam planned to make some weapons first. The most suitable and convenient weapon in the wild was a spear, so he sharpened a wooden stick, and then started today's work with Jacqueline. Moreover, Jacqueline also came up with an idea. Since they were going to act separately, they should agree on a signal, using this strange call, to indicate their current position to each other. If they called 3 times in a row, it would mean they were in danger. Not long after Adam went out, he saw a very dangerous footprint. This place was quite close to their campsite, which made him quite nervous. On the other side, Jacqueline discovered something good, a cave deep in the jungle. This was an unexpected pleasant surprise. So after Adam confirmed there were no wild beasts in the cave, he and Jacqueline moved their campsite into the cave. This place, which could shelter them from the wind and rain, was very important to them. Not only could it spare them from the wind and rain, but it also allowed them to stay in a dry place all the time. However, just as the two were moving their campsite, a rather terrifying thing happened. Right in the middle of their moving path, there was a fer-de-lance snake lying there. If they didn't see it and stepped on it, they would basically lose half their lives. So, Adam, startled, quickly moved. This not-so-big fer-de-lance snake luckily became Adam's dinner for the day. The two set up their new campsite in the cave, and then lit a fire. Adam started to deal with this reckless snake that blocked their way, skinning it and removing its internal organs. Jacqueline also came to help, but this situation made her, who had never killed any living thing before, wrinkle her brow. Soon, the snake was processed into a piece of smooth snake meat, a white and tender section, like a cream sausage, and under the roasting of the flame, it soon began to emit a greasy and fragrant smell. Adam, while enjoying this rare meat meal, didn't forget his original intention and continued to tempt Jacqueline. But at this time, Jacqueline still had some supplies in her body and didn't take the snake meat that Adam passed to her. Then, when night fell, as they were resting in this new campsite, they realized things weren't that simple. This cave was dry, cool, and sheltered from the rain. But they weren't the only ones who fancied this place. There were also countless other insects and small animals. So as soon as it got dark, when Adam and Jacqueline were preparing to rest, the cave instantly became lively. These large and terrifying insects made it completely impossible for the two to sleep, especially those strangely shaped spiders, made Jacqueline break out in goosebumps all over. After a very restless night passed, both of them, not having rested well, were a bit low on energy. Even though it was now daytime, they still chose to continue resting in the cave during the morning. And even worse, when Jacqueline went out to work, she realized she had unexpectedly gotten her menstrual period. Normally speaking, when a woman is on her period, it's a time when she needs nutrition. Not only was she a vegetarian, but she was also currently participating in a survival challenge. Even eating her fill was a problem, let alone getting enough nutrition. And when night came, the two still huddled together by the fire for warmth, preparing to rest. But they had only slept for a short while, when they were awakened again by a sudden noise. Tonight was yet another sleepless night. Without any means of illumination, they had no idea what was lurking around their campsite. On day 12, while Adam and Jacqueline were lighting a fire, they spotted a beast darting past, but they couldn't recognize what it was at all. However, judging by its size, it wasn't some large predator, so Adam planned to catch it and bring it back to camp, to have a hearty dinner. Therefore, this experienced hunter observed for a period of time. Then at the openings of some tree hollows, he used tinder, bird nests, and such to create smoke. Thick smoke drifted out from the hollow openings, and for a while, smoke began to drift everywhere. It seemed quite unlikely that they would be able to catch it now. Time came to day 14. Jacqueline, who had been eating only plants for 2 weeks, was nearing her limit. After all, she had been working constantly, and hadn't consumed enough energy, plus she was on her period. Life was truly miserable. So, a vegetarian participating in a survival show is really at a disadvantage. But Adam was a voracious meat eater. Jacqueline, whose body was nearing its limit, lay in the campsite. She completely didn't want to move anymore. But Adam could work while chatting with her, making her happy. Halfway through the challenge, the atmosphere between these two was still surprisingly harmonious. On day 17, the two people, starving and dizzy, began their final hunting operation. With a hint from Jacqueline, Adam caught a small lizard. Jacqueline still couldn't accept the act of killing, so she quickly moved away. However, when Adam roasted this small lizard over the fire, he knew the time had come. He began to extend his claws towards Jacqueline. Given the current situation, it was time to train this well-behaved vegetarian to eat meat. With a wicked smile on his face, Adam handed a lizard leg over to Jacqueline. Although her reason was screaming, "Don't eat it, don't eat it," the depletion of her body and the nearing end of the challenge forced her to slowly extend her hand. In order to overcome herself, to conquer this jungle, Jacqueline finally took her first bite of meat. Adam, watching from the side as Jacqueline overcame herself, revealed a gratified smile. By day 19, Adam was no longer satisfied with just making Jacqueline eat meat. This man, who had lost his mind, actually started making Jacqueline kill living creatures. The two lay on the mountaintop, talking freely about anything, but ultimately, Adam did it to make Jacqueline stronger. Over the course of these more than 2.5 weeks, this man and woman with excellent personalities had already established a deep friendship. As the first red glow of light appeared on the horizon, the 21st day had arrived. They now had to trek 10 kilometers down the mountain and find that mountain trail. This was an arduous challenge for both of them. After packing up a bit, Adam and Jacqueline encouraged each other and set off on the journey to leave. This long journey was quite difficult for two people whose physical strength was nearly depleted. Moreover, they had to watch out for hidden dangers along the way, such as snakes and various poisonous insects. However, the previous 20 days had already proven their resilient spirit. The two encouraged each other, supported each other, and finally, through a patch of grass, they saw the flat yellow road. The two rushed down excitedly, then climbed onto a passing car, and the challenge ended there. After these 21 days of survival, Adam's overall score rose to 7.8 points. Jacqueline's score rose from 7.1 to 7.5 points.